The following is a conversation with Mike Balazes, who is a member of the indie folk trio Oliver Hazard. Oliver Hazard has been making music since 2017 and has a new album being released in the upcoming months. Mike and I talk about the origins of the band as well as the struggles of touring and what it means to have their own day in their hometown. I hope you enjoy the conversation I had with Mike of Oliver Hazard. Okay, yeah, so happy to have Mike, one third of the trio that is Oliver Hazard, with us. Mike, thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I think the best place for me to start, being the history major that I am, I have to ask about the name Oliver Hazard and kind of where it comes from. I mean, I know where it comes from, but just curious if you guys knew the history prior, if it was just kind of random or what the basis behind that is.
For sure. Well, it's funny. I mean, we love history, and I think that's definitely like an interest of ours. But I think the impetus behind the name was more of like a trying to keep a regionality for who we are, and like kind of link ourselves to a sense of place. And so when we first started the band started in like a kind of a weird, fast pace, like serendipitous way. We basically I was working as an outdoor educator out in California, and I spent a lot of time in the mountains with students. We do like these 2-week trips, and you wouldn't have a phone or anything, so I'd make a lot of like handwritten lists, and a lot of the lists were like, hey, this is what I want to do by the end of whatever year it is. These are like some goals that I have, and one of the goals for that year in particular was play like a dive bar show. Sorry, in Ohio, like where I grew up.
Mm.
It's a really cool dive bar. And I've always wanted to perform at it. And I'd never really been like a musician that played outside of my bedroom. And so I took the show, and like a friend of mine was like, I can give you 20 minutes. He was like a local. And so I was home for 2 weeks in Ohio. I came home from California, basically to like see my family for Christmas. And I was like, I'm going to do this 20-minute dive bar show. And I hit up two buddies of mine, and I was like, hey, do you want to play the show with me? I'm kind of terrified to do it by myself. They said no originally, and then they're like, okay, like after some convincing, they were like, all right, we'll do it if we take it seriously. So I showed them some songs I was writing. There were like 5 of them. We put them together like in really simple arrangements, just to make the show really easy. And we played for our friends. Everybody loved it, and that kind of gave us the confidence to like keep writing more songs. So we wrote another like 5 songs the week after. And that same week, I was at this dive bar that I'd played the show, like, but during the day. I went and had met a friend for a beer, and another buddy walks in and goes, hey, did you hear about a contest? And I'm like, what contest? Like, oh, this local studio is doing this recording contest. If you submit your name, you win free recording time. And I was like, oh, cool. So I took the fake band name, put it into the lottery, and we ended up winning a recording contest that week. And so it was 10 songs we'd written before and after this dive bar show. I called the studio and was like, hey, can we just record all 10 of our songs, even though we won one free song? Can we record all 10 of them? Just put a bunch of mics in the room. Let's do it live. We'll be in and out in an hour. And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so we did that. We recorded all 10 songs, and then I had a flight back to California to go back to work, like a couple days later. And I was listening to the songs the night before I left. I was like, damn, these are pretty good. And so I hit up a buddy of mine. He was like, dude, we should probably think about doing this for, a living. Like, so let's put it out there. So I sent it to a friend who worked at a record label down in Los Angeles. And that week, they asked us if they could help us release the record. And so we didn't really know much about the music industry. I was working as an educator. Another member was working as a construction worker. The other one was like selling copy machines. We were all working just like regular jobs. And so we wrote the album, recorded it basically for free, and got like a record label to want to release it all within 3 to 4 weeks. And so everything happened really fast. Like the two guys didn't even believe there was a record label. They're like, yeah, right. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're like on their lunch break at their job. And so I was like, no, I swear. Like, I think they want to help us release this. I think we could try to do this if we want to. So, but anyway, at that point, we didn't even have a band name. And so we were like, okay, how do we choose a band name? And so we went through like all these iterations of just horrible names that, everyone, it was like a group text. There was like zero validation because there were just so many names. And I was like, these all like don't mean anything to us. And so I was trying to think of like I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, "Well, where are you from?" And I was like, "Well, we're from this town called, Waterville. I grew up in a town next to Waterville. It's called Perrysburg. It's named after this guy who, we grew up 10 minutes from Lake Erie, and it's named after this old sailor that, was kind of the victor of this War of 1812 battle that happened
Yeah.
on Lake Erie." And she's like, "Oh, what's his name?" I was like, "His name is Oliver Hazard Perry." She's like, "Oh, Oliver Hazard, that's pretty cool." I was like, "Yeah, it is pretty cool." And so we ended up choosing Oliver Hazard because the namesake kind of linked us to this special place where this band started. And it's also that special place that we still reside today. We throw our own music festival here. We try to give back to the community anytime we can. And yeah, I think it's like this is kind of the foundation for the band. So it feels like a fitting name for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that I think that's like the perfect tie back to where you're from. I love it. Kind of like talking about the music festival too. What does like Oliver Hazard Day mean to you guys? Having your own festival in a town that's not very big, I would assume.
Yeah,
It's
a couple
got to
thousand people.
mean right. It's kind of pretty much the same place I grew up, so
Yeah.
I imagine it's got to be a pretty big deal. And what does that mean to you guys, just to have like your own day and to kind of be recognized? And
Totally. Well, we all kind of started in a very similar fashion where we actually approached the town and we were like, "Hey, we'd like to like collaborate." When we were first starting, because we didn't have any money, we were like, "How do we like? You want to do like a joint T-shirt, like Oliver Hazard, Waterville, Ohio T-shirt?" It was like kind of a dumb idea, and she was like, "No, not really." And the mayor, this is the mayor, she was super smart, and she was like, "Why don't you guys just rip a concert like downtown, just put a stage in the middle of the road?" We're like, "Oh, we can do that." She's like, "Sure, yeah." She's like, "Just sign this form and we'll block the street off for you." We're like, "Oh, that's so cool." And so she was the one who kind of helped us kickstart the event. And I mean, in a town like this, like there's just not a lot of access to music. Like we've got the dive bar that we played at, and they get some good acts every once in a while. Like I saw like Justin Townes Earl and Warren Treaty and some cool acts when they're first starting. There's really not a lot of access to music unless you're willing to drive, an hour to 2 hours away, where you wait until some summer event comes along where, a good artist comes through, but that's pretty rare. And yeah, I think it feels like this mutually beneficial day for us where we're able to give back to the community. We donate a lot of money to our local arts commission. A lot of folks come and get to like see these artists that would otherwise never stop here. Like indie artists like us, and the artists that we book would never stop within like 60 miles of this town. So it's really cool. And then it's for us, it's really cool to see the like reaction of the folks that we book at this festival. Uh, Folks like Illiterate Light and Bendigo Fletcher and Jack Symes and all these like indie artists that we love. They come to our town and their eyes are like glowing because they're just like, "This is such a magical small town. I can't believe that you guys are from here." Like the mayor will like introduce us. It's just got this like kind of like this Tim Burton-esque, magical land vibe to it. So it's cool to just be there and experience it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, for us, like in where I grew up, like, kind of the same issue. Like artists don't come within probably like 200 miles of here. I don't know,
Yeah, it's a
like
lot.
Philly's the closest place, and that's a solid drive for me, like 2 hours. Yeah, something like that around here would be amazing as well. Like just the access, because people don't realize when you're in rural areas or like across the country, the access to these types of things is so minuscule, and there's not a lot of money put behind it.
For
Becomes really, really hard to make something of it if you're trying to. You really gotta, up and move almost to do something with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's really cool.
yeah, so you guys recently played Newport Folk Festival too. How was that? I imagine that was like a pretty big like bucket list memory for you guys. It had to be cool.
Yeah. It honestly, we dreamt about it since we started. And I swear I like emailed Newport Folk Festival like the day we started the band because it was like immediately I was like, I'd love to play this festival. I probably emailed them being like, "Hey, we started a band. Just want to let you know we're on your radar." You know what I mean? Like I loved that festival. It's such a huge piece of folk history. And I emailed them every from 2018 till now, just like giving them updates on the band, and they were very cordial. They'd be like, "Oh, thanks for the update." Like, not this year,
Yeah.
but thank you. And then so finally last year, I shot them an email and was like, "Hey, I'd like to invite you to our Boston show," because I know a lot of the folks who run it are from that area. That's kind of the closest music market. Yeah, and they came to the show
Nice.
last fall. They really enjoyed it, and then I shot them one last email just being like, "Hey, you know, we don't want to play at this festival to like just to perform it and to gain fans. Like what we really want out of this is to like meet other artists and like we're from an island, we're from Waterville, Ohio. There's no other bands here that are doing what we're doing, and we just love to like be a part of a community of other artists that are doing similar things to us and get a chance to meet them, you know. And of course, we want to play a show,
Right.
show folks what we're made of. But at the same time, for us, it was about just like being part of that community, and that was our biggest takeaway. The festival is so special, and there's just like a level playing field where you can see so many of your heroes, and they're all super approachable. And I feel like I met more people in a weekend than I thought I would meet in a lifetime that are, you know, heroes of mine. So it was really cool. It was really special.
Yeah, that's like easily one of the top 5 festivals I want to get to at some point or another. It just looks, yeah, it looks absolutely magical.
Totally.
Looks like a great place to be. So you guys, I'm curious, like when you guys are on a tour, how does that affect like your mental health on a day to day? So like I know for me, when I go out and travel, even if it's for a week, right, I come back and I feel like I'm absolutely spent, right?
Totally.
And you guys do it for months at a time, but like half a year probably even.
hmm
How does that, is there like a way you like recenter yourself on a daily while you're on tour? And then what does that look like maybe when you're back home?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it could definitely be tough. While we're on tour, especially at our stage, it's very difficult to like find a break, you know, because not only are you like playing the show, that's only 45 minutes of the day, but like, you know, 4 hours before the show, you're loading in and then you're sound checking and you're just like trying to find like a meal after you set up your merch table and like train the merch person who might be selling their merch that evening, you know. And we don't really have like a tour manager or any of that, you know. We're like decorating our own stage and putting up the lights and the banners and all that stuff. And not to mention, we drove like 6 hours before that just to get to the show, you know?
Mhm.
And you're sleeping maybe 6 hours a night if it's like a pretty burly tour. So, yeah, it definitely stacks up. One way that we manage it in a few ways. I think, especially like with our age, you know, it's like we started this band when we were in our late 20s. You know, we all quit our jobs in our late 20s. So it's not like we started the band when we were like 21, you know? And so the grind period of like sleeping on hotel floors and doing like the motels and all that stuff, like that didn't last super long. After 2 years of doing it, we realized we're like, dude, this is not sustainable. Like we'd rather just not be in a band if this is what it's gonna look like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we spend a little bit more just to like have comfort while we're on tour. That's one way we manage like our mental health. Is like we don't really like take like a huge consideration of, I mean, obviously there's a budget, but like we're not like afraid to stretch it to get like a nice Airbnb where all three of us get a room every night, or a restaurant and like eat a healthy meal that might cost a little more instead of just like pounding bar food and fast food. It's just like it's unsustainable. So I think one way we manage it is like having really good sleeping accommodations where we can like have our own space and get ample sleep, which I think is a huge part of mental health. Is like if you don't sleep enough, there's like a direct scientific relationship to like limited sleep and poor mental health, you know? And I think there's also similar correlation between eating well and mental health. And so we make sure to like nourish our bodies with like regular food as much as we can, and we try to find like unique options of like the healthiest food we can find. And I think last month in June, or like month and a half ago now, we did a month-long tour in the West Coast, and I think we only had to eat fast food one time out of the whole month. So we were doing pretty good as far as like eating well. So I think those are two of the main things we do. And then I wake up and I try to run in the morning. I'm not even like a big runner. I like other forms of exercise, but when you're on tour, you just kind of take what you can get, you know?
Right.
So that's one thing I'll do. I know Nate does it as well. And it's a good way to like explore the town too. You just like wake up
Yeah.
and just run aimlessly around whatever small city that you end up in, and find a cool coffee shop. But yeah, I'd say between exercise, getting good sleep, eating good food. Those are some of the main ways we try to maintain it on tour. And then also just like not micromanaging each other. Just like everybody has their tasks, and like if you can find some solo time just while you're working, like in like setting up your merch booth or whatever it is, we all know what to do, and we try to just
Mhm.
like give each other space, which is really important as a trio. And then when we get home, it's when we're off, we're off. Like spending time with family, you could spend time with your partners or whoever you're going home to, and just like making sure that you like unwind for at least a week before turning the Oliver Hazard switch back on.
Yeah. Yeah, especially too, like you guys aren't officially, you're not signed with the label, is that correct?
So we actually ended up signing with a label called Network out of Vancouver last year with this upcoming record, and then so we just signed with them recently.
Nice. Well, congrats on that. I
Yeah,
mean, I imagine, does that take any of like being smaller or even indie artists, you have a lot of hats that you got to wear in terms of social media, and everything else. Does that take any of that burden off, or does that still kind of sit with you guys?
not really. I'd say like labels in a way are kind of more of like they're almost like a bank or like a funding source for your records, so it alleviates like stress of trying to find like thousands of dollars to record our next song, you know what I mean? Which can be a
Mhm.
really expensive process for folks who don't record and produce their own music, which a lot of people do these days, and we're super jealous of that. But yeah, I'd say all of the social media burdens on us right now, and like all the like day-to-day business management and all that stuff. It's a lot, even when you do have partners. I think when you get to a certain stage in your career, you can hire like managers and have like having your management run your social media and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, for us, we know that the brand is best right now if we run it, I mean, it's our identity. So it's tough to kind of give that up right now,
Yeah.
Maybe one day when we're older and don't care as much, we could just kind of let someone else put a post up every week. But for now, I think we're just growing, and we really want to keep that growth and keep that trust with our fans. That when someone responds on social media, it's us. And we're
Yeah.
giving them the time of day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes a long way in connecting with folks, and yeah, just like it feels like nowadays everybody really just wants, to feel like they're talking to somebody who actually understands them, gets them, relates even in the smallest way. Uh,
For
so
sure.
I know I personally like love that about artists. If it's somebody I can relate to and they just message back, even if it's something small, it's cool. Um,
Totally.
so yeah, so I appreciate that. I know everybody else does too.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
in terms of like, if you guys have, if you're writing or, even if you're writing for your upcoming album, if you're having like a bad mental day, right? Is that something that you can kind of work through, or does that help your process at all? Or is it something that kind of like derails it and kind of got to wait for a better day kind of deal?
Yeah, I think for me, I know everyone's different, but for me, it can be tough to like, I was thinking of it as like a hierarchy of needs, like I feel like if I don't have like all my basic needs met, it's really hard for me to like put art forward, because art I feel like is super important for humans, but they need to like be mentally and like physically to be able to like make it happen. You know what I mean? It's a pretty like laborious process, and especially mentally. But yeah, I think there's kind of a balance where maybe you are having a bad day or like something happens that is like emotionally reflective, and you kind of like that doesn't disappear immediately. And I think like when you do kind of muster up a little more like strength and time post reflection, you can I think it's easy, like, to kind of harken back to those feelings in a state, more stability and like be able to
Mhm.
write about how you felt. Whereas I think writing about it in the exact moment can be a little tumultuous.
Yeah.
So yeah, usually for me specifically, I think I definitely write more when I'm like in a more stable and like happier state, than
Right. Gotcha. And do you think so? In general, I guess. So it's talked about a lot across, I feel like a lot of different avenues, but I don't know if it's talked about enough for artists. Do you think there's enough mental health like resources for artists? Like if you're having, really struggling, is there things you can reach out to or
I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. I don't really know of too many of them. I'm sure that they exist. But yeah, I think it's something that's like often overlooked in the music industry. Even at venues, it's not always the case where people are like looking out for your mental health. Like sometimes you enter a lot of these venues across the country and like you're kind of treated like a like kind of like trash, and like
yeah.
folks don't really consider like the strength it took to get you to that place,
Mhm.
whereas they just like woke up and like drove 4 minutes across town. And I just think there's like even just be the smallest things like just hospitality of folks being like welcoming you into their home could go such a long way for mental health. I just think like I grew up, my father was like a son of you know Greek immigrants, and I can like remember my grandparents and just like how hospitable they were, and I thought that was just like a big part of like European culture. So I always get like pretty miffed if like a venue isn't being hospitable, and I usually have like I feel like an older adult, and I usually have that conversation with whoever it is, and just like, hey,
Yeah.
we want to be treated with respect. I'm not sure who you had in your last night, but we're not them, and we're going to treat you with the respect that you treat us. So, let's just find a nice, like, common ground here because you might not be known, you might not know like what kind of day we had to get here, and we don't
Right.
know what kind of day you had. And so, I think, when it comes to mental health, I'm all about like starting from square one, like how do we make people's days better just with these simple processes every single day
Mm.
and just like act more human and I just feel like that's lost, and now, not even mentioning the fact that there are limited resources for mental health trauma and care during well, musicians are on the road. Um yeah, I don't know, I just feel like there is a big gap, and musicians are doing a really hard thing out there and it's hard to, you know, fill that void with, along the road for musicians just because I don't think that the right services are out there at the moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that was probably like not knowing a ton about the music industry prior to doing any of this. Like I think that's probably like been the biggest thing for me is that like I don't think I ever understood what went into a day-to-day tour and the the labor and the stress it put on artists and for them to
mhm,
have to be there and be like, everybody wants them to be their best self every time they see him on stage. And it's, yeah, I can only imagine the mental stress that requires and
for
requires you to kind of
sure.
go through.
Yeah, it's tough. It makes you like have compassion for people. I always think back to like when I was a kid, like all the artists that took the moment to like take a photo with me, and that was like I didn't realize how hard that probably was for that person. It's funny. I really enjoyed when we were out on tour with Proxima Parada. Nico, he's like just the greatest human on earth. But we would have these like long conversations about just like your like responsibility as a musician.
Mhm.
I think he has a really cool perspective of just like you chose this profession, and with this profession like comes this responsibility, and that responsibility is to like be a role model to a lot of these fans. And even if you are having a bad day, he's like, I get it. It's like we all have bad days. It's like, but you have to show up for the fan in that moment. And you can't brush them off because they're gonna remember that moment for the rest of their life, no matter if it's like a good response or a bad response. So it might as well be a good response,
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets really upset if he ever sees like a musician just like brush off the fan. He's just like, no, man, that's not what it's about. Um,
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah. I've had a few conversations, to say the least, with Nico about just different things like that. And I swear he's always been the nicest, the kindest, and yeah, nothing but good things to say about
Yeah,
any of the guys in Proxima, honestly.
for sure.
So, what is kind of changing gears a little bit in terms of the music you guys have put out, or even maybe a song you've not released yet? What's the song maybe just you are you're most proud of, and kind of why?
Well, we actually have a song coming out soon. It'll be like end of August. We're gonna roll out a song called Blood Moon, and it's just like, I'd say it's one of the more different songs we've ever released, and it almost sounds like it's probably the closest song that like sounds like music that I grew up on, you know, and like I grew up listening to, and kind of like more of this like alternative indie rock sound. So I'm pretty stoked about that one. And then there's this other song that is gonna come out later this year. It's called Raindrop River, and I grew up listening to a lot of like, you know, old folk music like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Paul Simon, and Grateful Dead, like all that stuff. And that was like what my parents were listening to. And I know Devin grew up listening to the same stuff. And that's kind of where our genre interests crossed, and that's, you know, kind of how we started this band. And this song, it like the way that the harmonies fell out of us during the recording process, it just like has this like reminiscence to like the 70s and the late 60s.
Nice.
So that one I think we're super proud of, just because it feels like one of the more like timeless songs that we've recorded, where you could kind of turn it on and you wouldn't really know what era it was recorded in, which I always appreciate that about artists. So those two are two I'm really excited about coming up here. So.
Nice. And those are going to be, I'm assuming, just singles off of the album? Is that...
Yeah, I think we're going to release the first half of the record like as an EP.
Okay.
And so that'll be out like this October, November.
Nice. So, how about a song or even an artist that you think, you know, maybe nobody pays enough attention to?
You know who I really enjoy, and I got to meet him 2 weekends ago at Newport, is this guy named John Craigie.
Okay.
He's a very like traditional and untraditional folk artist at the same time, and his art of the storytelling aspect of his music is just like unmatched by anyone in modern music. He is like, it's almost more entertaining to listen to what he has to say between songs than actually during the songs, because he's just so talented at storytelling. But he has this album, it's called Capricorn in Retrograde, and it's this record that was recorded in like a live record that was recorded in the Pacific Northwest in like 2016, and it's just so special because it's just this. It's also a comedy album in a way. You'll be in stitches. You're just like laughing because of the inter-song commentary. And then, you know, when he does play these songs, they're very heartfelt and serious. So it's this cool juxtaposition of very serious songs and like very like dry comedy commentary. But yeah, I think he's a totally like. And he would laugh at me if I said he was an underrated artist, because he's like, that's kind of just a backhanded way of saying that no one knows about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
But so that's also something I appreciate about him, is he kind of calls people out for these really simple ways of saying he should get more notoriety than he does.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever. I have to listen. I don't know if I've ever listened to any of this stuff, so I have to go back and take a peek at it.
Yeah, check that album out. It's a good intro. It kind of gives you a better perspective of who he is. So.
Okay. Yeah, no doubt. In terms of, so would you guys consider yourself folk music? And then if you do, like, kind of what is like your favorite part about that genre as a whole?
Yeah, I think we do. I know that it's like the lines are blurred a little bit. We have a lot of interest in like the indie rock side of things. So every once in a while we'll like release, I think like this next song specifically, it just, for us, it just feels a little just, you know, there's always like, we always want like a drum kit to come out and just like rip. But, and then Dev's is an amazingly talented electric guitar player. So there's not always like a lot of electric guitar on folk music in a way. Not to say there's none, you know, Bob Dylan came out and with electric guitar in the 60s, but, you know, it's usually associated with acoustics. So I feel like we, especially the way we do our live stuff, it feels a lot more modern. I would almost call it like modern folk, where there's a lot of bass and synthesizer and electric guitar. But I think what really pulls us into the folk genre, like the storytelling and the harmonies, and kind of, we always said that no matter what direction we took the band, the vocals would kind of be that like glue that makes us who we are. And I still think that's kind of what glues us to the folk genre. And even more macro than that, I think what really can like give us that like folk genre aspect is just like the sense of place that's found in our music. You know, we're kind of like through our music, I feel like we're like this looking glass into the Midwest, like a place that people otherwise aren't really looking. And so I feel like no matter if you're like considered hip hop or whatever, jazz or whatever genre you are, I think if you're telling stories, and kind of creating that sense of place in your stories, I feel like there's a little bit of folk within that, it's kind
Hmm.
of part of the folk legacy. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's partly like why I love folk music, and
mhm,
kind of growing up in an area that nobody knows about. You can definitely feel that through folk music. I feel like the storytelling is just the best.
for sure.
So yeah, so how about a couple minutes to maybe talk about the album or something that you guys are still on tour, I think. So yeah, plug yourself
Yeah.
here a little bit.
So we actually head out on the 3rd of September. We're doing like a whole month with the views. They invited us out for to support them. We're gonna do a bunch of East Coast shows. And then in October we're heading out on our own headline tour, and we're hitting like some of the biggest rooms we've ever played in before. And it'll be like a lot of major markets like Toronto, New York, Philly, DC, Boston. Like just kind of like the main East Coast circuit. I think we're hitting
Hmm.
Syracuse for the first time, which is kind of cool. But yeah, and then right around that time, we're gonna release an EP. I believe it'll be named after the single that we're gonna drop with it, which is Raindrop River, and it's a song kind of about where we grew up. We grew up with this river that runs through our town, and it kind of links all the towns together, just like how a lot of towns are set up, and I think a lot of our songs kind of revolve around. It's like almost like this bloodline for the band in a way.
Mm.
And then even the house that the band started in, it's called 34th River. It's what our first record was named. Um, that's where it's like sits right on the river, so it's definitely like a big piece of the band.
Mhm.
So yeah, that'll be the name of the EP. But yeah, we're stoked. I think we're just hoping to. We've picked up a lot of momentum this year, just with how much we've been on the road. And, I feel like we're really like putting ourselves out there. So we're just hoping that it keeps working out as much as it can. We're kind of old school in the way where we don't have like a crazy social media following, but we're putting in the labor on the road as well. So just trying our best.
Yeah, 100%. Like I seeing you guys live, like I thought it was so good. Like you guys filled the room without like a drum kit. I thought that was like so cool.
Thanks,
Nico
man.
actually commented on how loud you guys were for not having a drum kit as well. So
For sure.
yeah, if you guys have the chance to see Oliver Hazard live, I'd 100% recommend it. Yeah, I can't wait to hear the new EP. And yeah, man, thanks for just spending a little bit of time with me and chatting up. I appreciate you.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.